Hey guys, tonight we travel way back to ancient Rome. You're not sitting on a marble bench or strolling through a perfectly straight road this time, no? You're barefoot in a dusty tunic, standing in a cramped Roman field, holding cabbage. And not just any cabbage. This is the plant that Roman soldiers trusted more than their shields, a leafy green miracle supposedly capable of healing just about anything. You're probably already blinking in disbelief, and honestly you should be. Because cabbage for battle wounds. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge down a gravel road just outside the Roman camp. The late sun is melting across the tops of distant cypress trees. Nearby centurions clank past in bronze armor, but yeah, you're focused on the cabbage patch. The leaves are broad, waxy, veined like tired hands. You pluck a head of it, dense, sturdy, cool to the touch. You're not here to cook dinner. You're here to prepare for battle. Because according to Roman military superstition, smearing cabbage juice on your wounds before getting them somehow helped you heal faster after. Don't think about it too hard, just rub and march. Cato the Elder, a staunch advocate of Roman traditionalism and self-sufficiency, wrote extensively about cabbage as the go-to solution for nearly everything. If a man eats cabbage every day, he wrote with terrifying certainty, he will never fall ill. It was less science and more cult-like belief. But when you live in an age where leeches mercury and burning your skin with hot irons were standard treatments, a nice crunchy vegetable must have seemed positively futuristic. So as the sun dips lower and campfires flicker on the horizon, you glance at your bandaged leg now sticky with a cabbage poultice. It itches, it smells. You have no idea if it's doing anything, but your commander swears by it, and that's good enough for you. Nearby, someone coughs violently. Give him cabbage, someone mutters. Another soldier groans about a toothache. Cabbage water. And yet another claims he dreams more clearly if he eats cabbage before bed. Good for the mind, he whispers, then snores. Of course, historians still argue whether Roman cabbage usage was rooted in true belief or just a lack of better options. The medical papyri of the time were vague at best and hilariously confident at worst. Some physicians insisted cabbage had to be boiled twice. Others declared it was most potent raw with vinegar and salt. No one agreed on anything except that cabbage definitely did something. You slouch deeper into your wool blanket, your feet poking toward the fire. Across from you, a fellow soldier tears cabbage leaves into strips and wraps them around his bruised hands like gloves. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Prevents swelling, he says, as if that explains everything. At some point, you start to believe it too. The cabbage keeps showing up in meals and medicines, even in military training. Recruits are taught not only how to hold a gladius, but also how to make a poultice from crushed cabbage hearts. The gods gave us cabbage, the trainer says with a straight face, because bandages run out. Now keep in mind this is the same civilization that also recommended crocodile dung as birth control. So maybe temper your expectations. Still, there's something comforting about cabbage. It's earthy, it's real. It grows in common soil. It's not brewed in temples or sold by shadowy healers. It's right there in your hand, green and firm. It doesn't lie. It might not save your life, but at least it won't make things worse. And in ancient Rome, that's already a miracle. Back in the barracks, your leg wound weeps gently through the cabbage wrap. You can almost convince yourself it stings less. You roll onto your side, exhausted from drills, soothed by the chirping cicadas outside the tent flap. Someone's boiling cabbage broth over a low fire, and its bittersweet scent lulls you into a daze. Tomorrow, more training, maybe even a march, maybe another fight, but tonight you dream in green. You wake before dawn, your body stiff, and your legs still wrapped in that half-wilted cabbage poultice. It's cold against your skin and a little slimy now. You peel it off with a grunt, toss it to the ground, and shuffle toward the center of the Roman encampment. There's a strange noise echoing from beyond the tent, laughter, clinking goblets, someone singing off-key. You follow the sounds to what looks like a banquet in progress. It's not formal like something Cicero might attend with silk togas and theatrical sighs. This is earthy, loud, and filled with the kind of cheer that usually precedes either a terrible decision or a wrestling match. You duck under a canvas flap into the makeshift hall. Low tables are lined with roasted meats, pickled fish jugs of watered-down wine, and of course, cabbage. Lots of it. Steamed cabbage. Pickled cabbage. Cabbage chopped fine into a salad with vinegar and herbs. Someone even molded cabbage into little leaf-shaped cakes, which is both impressive and a little suspicious. Welcome to a Roman cabbage banquet. Yes, they really happened. In some parts of the empire, cabbage wasn't just a cure, it was a celebration. You plop onto a worn bench beside a merchant from Hispania, who's halfway through a story about how he once ate an entire head of cabbage before a drinking contest. Didn't get drunk, he says proudly, eyes twinkling. Not even a little. Kept my balance, insulted, the magistrate walked straight home. This is not an isolated claim. Romans believed cabbage had powerful anti-inebriation properties. In fact, it was common to serve cabbage before a night of heavy drinking, based on the belief it lined the stomach and somehow absorbed or repelled the effects of wine. The logic is fuzzy, the results even fuzzier. Yes, you nibble on a pickled leaf. It's tart sharp, oddly refreshing. The older woman across from you raises her eyebrows. It'll clean your blood, she says. You pause mid-chew. Clean your blood, also your bile. And your thoughts. The trifecta of ancient Roman diagnostics, blood, bile, and bad vibes. The meal rolls on and the stories get louder. Someone claims cabbage cured his insomnia. Another boasts it cured his neighbor's gout. One man swears he fed it to his sick goat and the goat lived another year. A miracle, he says, pouring himself more wine. Historians still debate whether these cabbage banquets were more about health or superstition. Some think it was dietary prudence disguised as folk medicine. Others suspect it was just an excuse to gather and brag about one's digestion. But the sheer reverence for cabbage remains consistent no matter who tells the story. At one point, a young boy barely 12 is handed a cabbage leaf like it's a rite of passage. He chews it grimly, his face twitching with every bite. Everyone cheers. Now you'll live to 30, someone calls out. The boy does not look convinced. You excuse yourself and step outside belly full head, buzzing not from wine but from the sheer absurdity of it all. Yet something about the ritual feels sincere. These people truly believe in cabbage, not just as food, but as a friend, a protector, a silent, leafy guardian that grows without fuss and never asks for thanks. Back near your tent, you find two soldiers arguing over whether to eat cabbage before or after drinking wine. One insists pre-wine cabbage preserves clarity. The other says post-wine cabbage prevents hangovers. The debate ends in a belching contest. The winner gets another cabbage leaf. You lie down again this time with a full belly and a cabbagey aftertaste clinging to the back of your throat. You try not to think about it too much. Sleep comes quickly. Outside, a fox sniffs at the discarded poultice you threw earlier. It gives one unimpressed snort and trots away. Even wild animals know when to pass on a folk remedy. But back in the banquet tent, the revelers go on singing and the cabbage keeps steaming in its pots, ever present, ever confident. By the time you reach the forum the next day, your tunic is sticking to your back, and the air smells like warm stones and horse sweat. Marble columns gleam under the late morning sun, but you're not here to admire architecture. You're here to listen, because today someone important is speaking. Not a senator or a general, but Cato the Elder. Or rather, one of his many writings being quoted loudly and without irony by a man wearing a purple-striped toga who clearly believes he's delivering divine wisdom. The quote rings out over the murmuring crowd. "It is cabbage, my friends, that has cured my countrymen since the founding of Rome." He pounds his chest as if to emphasize the holy nature of leafy greens. People nod. They whisper. One older man clutches a small pouch of dried cabbage and mutters something like a prayer. Cato wasn't just a statesman. He was an agriculturalist, a moralist, and quite possibly the first cabbage influencer in history. In his treatise De Agricultura, he writes that cabbage is not only healthy, it's vital, a panacea. He recommends it cooked raw, mashed into wounds, and even stuffed into ears for aches. You stand in the shade, half listening, half skeptical. Stuffed into ears, really? But to the Romans, Cato was no fool. He represented the ideal of the stern, rustic Roman who didn't need Greek luxuries or expensive doctors, just a well-tilled field discipline in Cabbage. According to him, Cabbage cured digestive problems, eliminated fatigue, eased childbirth, reduced swelling, removed pimples, and brace yourself, even reversed baldness. Yes, baldness, just rub it in. Historians still argue whether Cato genuinely believed all this or was simply parroting older folk knowledge. Some think he exaggerated to emphasize the virtues of simplicity over decadence. But regardless, his writings were preserved read and followed by many Romans for centuries, and so Cabbage moved from the field to the forum, endorsed by none other than a founding father of Roman conservatism. You drift away from the crowd and into a small apothecary shop tucked between two sandstone buildings. The scent of dried herbs and olive oil greets you. Behind the counter, an old woman is pounding something in a mortar cabbage, of course, mixed with honey and vinegar. For swelling, she explains without looking up. Also for bad dreams, and bad luck, and bad teeth. You glance at the cluttered shelves. Jars of dried roots, pots of ointments, and several tightly packed bundles of cabbage leaves hanging like forgotten laundry. You ask if she has anything for a sore shoulder. She eyes you, then hands over a bundle wrapped in linen. Boil these. Wrap the steam in cloth. Sleep with it under your head. You thank her even though you're not quite sure what steam and cloth means. Back outside, two slaves are scrubbing a stone step with cabbage water. Keeps away fleas, one mutters. The other adds, and lawyers. Hard to say which is worse. You begin to notice cabbage everywhere now. Not just in kitchens or markets, but carved into little reliefs painted on dining room walls, woven into garlands for household gods. It's no longer just a plant. It's practically an emblem. By midday, the sun is high and you're dozing in the shade of a fig tree, the linen-wrapped cabbage steam bundle tucked awkwardly under your neck. It smells vaguely sour, but not unpleasant. And if you try hard enough, maybe you can believe it's healing something. A group of children runs past laughing and tossing cabbage leaves like frisbees. One shouts, "It's magic armor." Maybe it is, or maybe it's just a vegetable that's very good at marketing. You close your eyes again and let the thought fade into the afternoon hum. You wake in the twilight, head sweaty, linen bundle crumpled under your chin, cabbage juice having soaked halfway through your tunic. Somewhere between a dream and a nap, you imagined your shoulder tingling, gently healing maybe. Or just sticky. Hard to say. The fig tree casts long shadows now, and the street buzzes with the end-of-day shuffle. But in a narrow alley off the market, a different kind of business is underway. You're drawn in by the low murmur of voices and the scent pungent and oddly medicinal. It's a healer's booth. Not a grand physician's office, no marble busts or imported amphorae. Just a stool, a bucket, a few linen rags, and a man with eyebrows that could frighten birds. He's smearing something green and lumpy onto a woman's swollen foot. You already know what it is. Cabbage mashed and steeped in vinegar. Reduces tumors, the man mutters as he works. Brings down fevers, stops the spread of gangrene. You flinch, he continues. Also works on colic, dysentery, and tooth demons. Tooth demons. This is the world of Roman folk medicine. Less Galen, more gut instinct and inherited traditions. You glance at his little table bowls of old wine scraps of herbs, a bronze scraper, and a small tablet etched with what looks like a cabbage recipe. According to Roman texts, cabbage was prescribed for everything from headaches to childbirth. Women were advised to chew raw cabbage during labor for strength. Men, meanwhile, drank cabbage water before battle to fortify the courage. As if courage lived in your liver, but it wasn't all rustic guesses. There were actual applications that made sense. Cabbage is anti-inflammatory, rich in vitamins, and antimicrobial to a small extent. Modern science gives it a respectful nod now, especially in poultices for bruises or skin inflammation. But back then it was the duct tape of ancient Rome. Historians still argue whether the cabbage cult was genuinely medicinal, or just another expression of Roman practicality use. What grows believe, what works, ignore the rest. You watch the healer finish wrapping the woman's foot. She hobbles off with a cabbage-stuffed sandal, nodding gratefully. The man turns to you. You look like you've got a spirit in your belly. You politely decline, though. Now your stomach does feel a little off. Curse the banquet cabbage. Back near the forum, someone's crying out in pain. A crowd gathers. A man's lying on the ground clutching his side. Blood stains his tunic. You expect someone to fetch a real doctor. Instead, a vendor pushes through the onlookers with a basket of, you guessed it, steamed cabbage. He tears off a handful, presses it to the wound, and begins to chant. This is where it gets weird. Some Roman traditions held that cabbage, if blessed under the right moon phase, could draw out toxins and bad spirits. Not symbolic ones, literal malevolent forces causing illness. The cabbage, acting as a sponge of sorts, absorbed the sickness. You were supposed to burn it afterward, or bury it, or for reasons no one can explain, feed it to a black goat. You leave before the goat arrives. As night settles in, you find yourself back at your cot, tired and cabbage-weary. Your shoulder still aches and your hands smell like soup. But there's something oddly reassuring about the repetition of it all. Rub, boil, mash, apply. Ancient routines that, in their own leafy way, bridge the gap between fear and healing. Before drifting off, you wonder if cabbage could truly fix everything. Would we ever need anything else? The next morning, you wake up scratching your ankle. It's red and blotchy, and something definitely bit you during the night. You reach for your sandal, thinking nothing of it, until someone nearby mutters, "Rub some cabbage on it." Of course. You glance at your tent mate who's already chewing on a cabbage leaf like it's a piece of gum. "For the nerves," he says with a straight face. You don't even bother asking which nerves. Today, you're in the heart of the city again, standing near a marble fountain in front of a columned building, part temple, part council chamber, part informal gossip arena. Roman elites in togas drift around like theatrical ghosts, robes billowing hands, gesturing as if their words might physically move mountains. And here too, Cabbage. You watch a senator, probably one of the more eccentric ones, pull a crinkled parchment from his sleeve. He holds it aloft as if announcing a new law. It's a list of his personal cabbage remedies. He reads aloud, voice rising above the hum of city life. For bellyaches, raw cabbage soaked in seawater. For tooth pain, roasted cabbage stem chewed slowly while reciting poetry. You snort quietly, that last bit might just be for style. Someone interrupts him. What about for memory? 2 leaves on the forehead, he replies solemnly. 1 on each temple. Another man chuckles. It didn't help you remember your wife's name at last week's trial. Laughter rolls through the crowd. The senator ignores him and keeps reading. Also useful against envy, jealousy, and excessive horn blowing. You pause. Horn blowing. Surely a metaphor, or maybe not. Historians still argue whether these elite endorsements were sincere or performative. Was Cabbage genuinely respected by the Senate, or was it just another way to flaunt rustic wisdom in the face of Greek-educated snobbery? Because see, Roman identity often involved a tug-of-war between tradition and progress. On one side, the stoic farmer soldier who healed with dirt and cabbage. On the other, the urban sophisticate quoting Hippocrates while sipping imported fig syrup. And Cabbage became a symbol of the good old days, a living critique of excess, a crunchy reminder that your ancestors didn't need spas or foreign oils. They just needed leaves. At lunch, you're invited to dine with a mid-level bureaucrat. Nothing fancy bread olives and yes, a steaming dish of cabbage cooked with garlic and cumin. He insists on pouring olive oil over the top to bring out the healing humors. You chew politely. It's fine. Then he pulls out a tiny wax tablet filled with scribbled notes. I've been documenting my digestion, he says proudly, ever since I switched to cabbage-based meals. You raise your eyebrows. He nods eagerly. Day 3, lighter bowels. Day 5, improved focus. Day 9, prophetic dreams. You nearly choke on your forkful. What kind of dreams? About horses, he says seriously, and occasionally Neptune. Outside, a passing orator shouts about a new temple being built. Inside, your host leans across the table and whispers, I hear the high priest uses cabbage to cleanse sacred spaces. You nod solemnly, unsure whether that means he burns it or just waves it around. You spend the afternoon wandering through a library annex, flipping through scrolls that all seem to mention cabbage at least once. Recipes, remedies, even poems. One particularly heartfelt piece describes cabbage as the green sigh of the gods. You decide that's probably not about digestion. Probably. By sunset, your ankle rash is mostly gone. You didn't actually use cabbage, it just faded. But when someone asks you, lie and say the poultice helped, it's easier than explaining time and immune systems. You drift homeward through streets still smelling faintly of smoke sweat and simmering greens. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays, and just for a moment, you picture a world where cabbage really could cure everything. You're woken this time by a loud belch one that seems to shake the very fabric of your tent. Your tent mate groans and mutters too much cabbage before rolling over and pulling the blanket over his head. The scent that follows confirms it. Outside, the sun's just peeking over the tiled rooftops, and the street vendors are already setting up baskets of olives, amphorae, of oil bundles of herbs. And then there's the vegetable cart with nothing but cabbage. Red, green, curly, flat pickled raw shredded an entire spectrum of Roman faith in one display. Today's goal: find the man they call the farting philosopher. You head to the public gardens near the baths of Caracalla. And sure enough, surrounded by a small crowd of half-curious, half-horrified students there, he is a wiry man with wild gray curls, sandals held together by sheer stubbornness, and a cabbage leaf tied to his belt like a badge of honor. His name, Gaius Calventius. Philosopher, healer. Occasional menace to quiet public spaces. He's mid-lecture when you arrive. Cabbage, he says, holding a leaf skyward is the door to clarity. It purifies not only the body, but also the soul. And yes, it causes wind, but in that wind, my friends, lies truth. A few students suppress laughter. One does not. Gaius continues undeterred. Cabbage forces honesty. It expels toxins and also shame. Apparently, this man became famous or infamous for claiming that eating large quantities of cabbage unlocked deeper philosophical insights. His followers would eat fast, meditate, and pass wind in group harmony, hoping to reach what Gaius called the clouded plateau of understanding. You can't make this stuff up, but he did. He pauses mid-lecture to offer you a slice of cold cabbage pie. For mental clarity, he insists you nibble. It's aggressively bland. Historians still argue whether Gaius was a true believer or an eccentric performer. Some suggest he might have suffered from ergot poisoning, or chronic gas, which could explain both his obsession and his energy levels. One of his students leans over and whispers, "He once debated a senator for 6 hours while eating nothing but boiled cabbage. Won the argument, lost 3 friends." You sit through more of the lecture, which spirals into a rant against figs too smug and olives pretentious. Cabbage, he insists, has never lied, has never disappointed. Cabbage is what we should all aspire to be: layered, humble, and slightly damp. You leave before he starts the interpretive poetry. Later at the baths, you overhear 2 citizens discussing their digestion as they soak. One swears by cabbage for cleansing the pathways, the other frowns. But the dreams it gives me so vivid. I woke shouting about wolves last night. Turns out cabbage was also blamed or credited for causing strange dreams. In some Roman homes, children weren't allowed cabbage at night for fear of nightmares. In others, it was deliberately served to invite wisdom from the gods. Because what better way to commune with Jupiter than via a fermented salad? As you float in warm water, steam rising around you, you start to feel oddly weightless. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's the cabbage-scented soap someone brought in. Or maybe the old philosopher was onto something. You imagine cabbage leaves drifting across the surface of your mind, soothing, cooling, whispering strange ancient truths. You burp. It smells like lunch. And just like that, the clarity is gone. The following morning, the air smells like fish smoke and faintly of pickled greens. You wander toward the market's edge where stalls overflow with everything from cracked pottery to beaded amulets. A goat chews a sandal. A baker yells something unprintable. And in the corner, half hidden behind a pillar, someone is copying cabbage recipes onto parchment with alarming seriousness. You drift closer and realize the scribe is transcribing from a scroll of Apicius Rome's most famous cookbook. Known for his extravagant taste and love of flamingo tongues, seriously, even he found room for cabbage in his gluttonous repertoire. Today's recipe: cabbage with cumin coriander vinegar and surprise fermented fish sauce. A blend the modern stomach might protest, but to Roman sensibilities, a delight. The scribe notices your interest and begins to talk. You know, Apicius once claimed pickled cabbage extended life. Said it could sharpen eyesight and restore memory. He taps his temple. Haven't forgotten my aunt's birthday in 3 years. You ask what else cabbage was used for in cooking. His eyes light up. Oh, we stew it with barley, bake it in pastry, shred it raw into salads with honey and dates. And he leans in, we even stuff dormice with it. You blink. Dormice, stuffed with cabbage. He nods proudly. Good balance of fat and fiber. Around you, vendors shout prices. A butcher flings a goat's leg onto a scale. Meanwhile, 2 matrons haggle over the last head of purple cabbage, nearly coming to blows before agreeing to split it. They tear it in half with the kind of mutual respect usually reserved for peace treaties. Historians still debate whether these cabbage-heavy meals were eaten for flavor or function. Roman cuisine was surprisingly sophisticated, full of layered spices and textural contrasts. But cabbage endured because it was versatile, cheap, and easy to store. Fermented or dried, it could survive journeys across the empire. You duck into a food stall for a midday bite. The cook hands you a clay plate with grilled cabbage leaves wrapped around spiced minced meat. You bite in. It's smoky rich with a sharp tang of vinegar. Not bad. You might even order another. Nearby, a physician lectures a group of students under a colonnade. He waves a scroll like a sword. Cabbage in the morning strengthens the bones. At midday, it clarifies the blood. At night, he pauses dramatically, it opens the soul. Someone in the back asks what that means. The physician frowns. It means eat your cabbage. You finish your meal and continue through the crowd, noticing how often cabbage appears, not just as food or medicine, but as culture. There's a playbill announcing The Tale of the Cabbage Merchant, a comedic farce apparently featuring 4 disguises and 1 very unlucky mule. You pass a mosaic in progress outside a shop. Tiny tiles slowly forming the image of a banquet. And yes, there it is, a glistening green head of cabbage front and center on the table, shining like a jewel. Later, you stop at a fountain and spot a little boy feeding cabbage leaves to a stray dog. The dog sniffs, then wolfs it down. The boy laughs. Now you'll live forever. You're not sure if he's joking. Back at your lodging, you find a basket waiting at your door. Inside cabbage? A gift from your host. No note. No explanation. Just faith and fiber. You sigh, sit down, and start chopping. Because honestly, it's not the worst way to end the day. It's twilight again, and you find yourself outside the city walls in a quiet grove where the air feels cooler and the ground crunches with dry leaves. You're not here to forage or stroll. You're here to witness something stranger, a cabbage ritual. A small group of Romans is gathered around a flickering torch circle. They wear simple tunics, their heads covered with vine crowns. One by one, they step forward to place cabbage leaves at the base of a stone altar. Not just any stone, but one etched with the name Salus, the goddess of health. You keep your distance, sitting on a log under a gnarled olive tree, observing in silence. A woman in the circle raises a small clay bowl and chants softly. Then she sprinkles wine over a pile of cabbage, letting it soak the leaves like some divine salad dressing. You stifle a laugh, but no one else is amused that this is serious business. Welcome to the fringe world of cabbage magic. See, while mainstream Roman medicine leaned on logic herbs and the occasional bloodletting, everyday Romans often hedged their bets with folk practices. Cabbage wasn't just a treatment, it was a talisman, a buffer against misfortune, illness, and even curses. One old belief claimed that burying a cabbage at the threshold of your home could ward off evil spirits. Another suggested burning dried cabbage leaves at the new moon to prevent nightmares. And in particularly superstitious households, hanging cabbage stalks from the rafters was said to repel sickness alongside garlic, of course. Historians still argue how widespread these magical uses truly were. Some say they were limited to rural areas. Others believe even urban Romans quietly followed these rituals behind closed doors. What's certain is that cabbage occupied a unique space between medicine, magic, and myth. The ritual continues. One man steps forward and presses a leaf to his chest, whispering a prayer. You catch the words "restore balance" and "cleanse the ill humors." Another drops a sprig of mint alongside his cabbage offering, perhaps to sweeten the deal with the gods. A teenage girl holds up a necklace made of braided cabbage veins. She kisses it, then places it on the altar like a sacred object. Someone behind her hums a soft, repetitive tune that sounds more lullaby than liturgy. You realize there's something tender about this. Absurd, maybe, but earnest. They're not expecting miracles, they're looking for comfort, control, a feeling that they've done something in a world that often gives them nothing. You think of modern rituals, crystals on nightstands, wellness teas, moon water, and wonder if we're really so different? Maybe Cabbage was just their version of chamomile, just leafier. As the group finishes, they quietly disperse. One woman stays behind, sweeping the leaves into a woven basket. Not to throw away, but to compost. "Return it to the earth," she murmurs. "Let it heal again." You walk back to the city slowly, the scent of burned cabbage lingering in your hair. Stars blink overhead, and for once the streets feel calm. A cat darts across a rooftop. A flute echoes from a tavern window. You pass a shuttered market stall with a single cabbage left on its counter. You stop, pick it up, and gently place it at the base of a tree. Not for health, not for magic, just for the gesture. Then you head home, not entirely sure what you believe anymore. The next day dawns sticky and hot. The kind of day where everything feels too loud, too close, too fermented. You slip through a narrow alley to escape the noise, your sandals sticking slightly with each step. The city is stirring, sluggish but determined, like an old mule climbing a hill. You end up near a colonnaded public hall, where a tour guide, one of those self-important types who never breaks character, is explaining ancient Roman dining customs to a group of wealthy tourists from Alexandria. You linger at the edge of the group listening. He speaks of vomitoriums, but you know the truth now. Despite the myth, vomitoriums weren't places where Romans purged between courses. They were just exit corridors in theaters. But even that myth somehow ties back to cabbage, because cabbage in the ancient Roman world was believed to prepare the stomach for indulgence. Not to make you vomit, but to help you avoid needing to. According to tradition, eating raw cabbage before a feast could tighten the stomach, making it less likely to reject what was coming. Think of it as a primitive antacid, except instead of chalky tablets, it was bitter, fibrous leaf chunks. Yum. You peek into a nearby triclinium, one of those Roman dining rooms where people recline dramatically on couches to eat. On the mosaic floor, a faint cabbage motif curls alongside depictions of wine vessels and wheat sheaves. Inside, servants are preparing for a mid-morning symposium. Silver trays of figs and cheeses, glazed duck honey pastries, and a large bowl of shredded cabbage. Dressed in vinegar and olive oil, lightly salted. One of the guests lifts a bite and says it protects the belly. Another replies it ruins the taste of wine. A third sighs only if you drink wine like a goat. Historians still argue about cabbage's digestive role. Some believe it was more placebo than potion. Others point to its high sulfur content and natural fiber as genuine gut helpers. What's not debated, its omnipresence. Rich or poor, rural or urban cabbage was on everyone's plate often as the first course. Later that day, you visit a temple kitchen where meals are prepared for the priesthood. A young boy is carefully folding cabbage leaves around bundles of spiced barley. Offerings, he says softly, not for the gods, for the acolytes, helps them fast longer. You imagine fasting for 3 days sustained only by cabbage. It's a bleak image, crunchy, but bleak. Outside, a theater troupe rehearses a comedy in the plaza. You catch a snippet of dialogue. Actor. 1. My wife feeds me cabbage and says it keeps me young. Actor. 2. Then why do you groan like a dying donkey every time you stand? Actor 1. Because I am young. Just dramatic. Laughter follows. Even in jokes, cabbage is ever present. You retreat to a shaded courtyard where 2 older men play dice. One is shirtless, his chest sunburned, and his hands stained with green juice. Tried a new poultice, he grumbles. Didn't stop the rash, but I think it scared it. The other chuckles. Try drinking it next time. If your rash stays, at least you'll forget how bad it itches. That night, over your own modest dinner of bread and cheese, you chew a few bites of cabbage just to see. It's bitter, yes, but earthy grounding. Like eating something that's been in the ground long enough to know secrets. And as the moon climbs and the city dims, you feel not healed exactly, but stable. As if the cabbage has quietly lined your insides with something firm and unshakable. It may not be magic, but maybe that's enough. You rise the next day to a sharp breeze and the sound of sandals slapping down the street. Someone is chasing a goat. Naturally, the goat has cabbage dangling from its mouth. Naturally, no one is surprised. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and set off toward the medical quarter of the city, a cluster of buildings tucked between a bathhouse and a scriptorium. This is where the more serious healers work. Men in dark robes, heads shaved in strange patterns, scrolls tucked under their arms like shields. You slip into one such building, a low-lit chamber, filled with wooden benches and the scent of ink vinegar and human anxiety. A physician is giving a lecture, and today's topic, you guessed it, cabbage. He paces slowly in front of a class of young scribes. The ancients were not fools, he begins. They knew the value of this plant, not only for digestion, but for cramps, coughs, colds, and cancers of the flesh. You blink. That last one is vague, terrifying, and somehow still less concerning than the fact that everyone here is nodding like this is perfectly normal. He gestures to a small amphora of cabbage-infused oil. Warm and applied to the chest for congestion, to the belly for indigestion, to the temples for madness. You glance around. One student is actually dabbing the oil on his own forehead. The physician continues. Steeped leaves soothe tooth pain. Roasted stems help aching joints. Raw leaves reduce inflammation. Pickled cabbage balances bile. A hand rises in the back. Does it help with marital discord? Laughter ripples through the room. The physician deadpans only if you don't talk during dinner. Historians still argue whether these treatments were based on trial and error or pure speculation. Some evidence suggests early Roman healers cataloged symptoms in great detail, correlating recovery with dietary inputs. Others suggest most of this was glorified guesswork. Outside, the conversation continues. A patient limps in carrying a jar of cabbage mash. I've used this for my hip every night, he says. Still hurts like Tartarus, but at least it smells like effort. Another man claims he drinks boiled cabbage water with honey and coriander every morning. Hasn't cured a thing, but I feel smug about it. You pass a small apothecary where a woman is crushing cabbage leaves into paste and straining the liquid into tiny flasks. She sells them as general fortifiers. One customer asks if it works. She shrugs. Depends if you believe it should. As the day wears on, you stop for rest near a fountain. A grandmother is rubbing her grandson's scraped knee with cool cabbage leaves. This is what my nonna did for me, she says, her voice like worn leather. We don't change what works. You wonder if it did work or if belief just numbed the sting. Maybe that's the power of rituals. They tell your body it's safe even when it isn't. And sometimes that's enough to start healing. Back in your lodging that night, you find a surprise left on your doorstep, a pouch of dried cabbage with a note. For your thoughts, should they grow heavy. You smile. It's the closest thing to poetry anyone's offered you in days. You steep the leaves in hot water. Sip slowly and let the warm bitterness settle behind your eyes. You lie back, hands behind your head, listening to the wind curl through the courtyard. Maybe cabbage won't cure everything, but it's trying its best. It's early evening, and you're leaning against a stall in the market when an argument breaks out between two vendors. It begins as so many Roman arguments do with wine, or more precisely, whether cabbage should be eaten before or after consuming it. I tell you, shouts a man in a stained tunic holding a grape cluster like a weapon. You eat cabbage before wine. It guards the head. Only a fool believes that counters the other slamming a ladle into a bucket of pickled greens. You eat it after to calm the belly. Everyone knows that. The crowd around them is nodding, murmuring, some laughing, others fiercely taking sides. And here you are caught in the middle of the great cabbage wine debate. This isn't a modern health forum. There's no nutritionist weighing in. Just farmers, merchants, street performers, and you all throwing their opinions into the steaming communal stew of Roman folk wisdom. This question surprisingly is ancient. Cato naturally recommended cabbage before wine to prevent drunkenness. Later, physicians and poets, however, suggested it was best after, as a remedy for headaches and stomach upset. Apicius himself included cabbage in meals before and after drinking, perhaps hedging his bets. Historians still argue whether cabbage's use in hangover and intoxication management was based on any real observation, or simply became tradition because it sounded useful and tasted bitter enough to feel medicinal. You follow the shouting vendors down the street as their conversation devolves into name-calling. Eventually, a centurion clearly off duty marches up and ends it with a declaration, "Eat cabbage when you want." But drink wine first. That way you'll stop caring either way. He gets the loudest cheer. Later that night, you're invited to a dinner at a modest domus just outside the city. The host, an older man with the cheerful energy of someone who knows everyone's secrets, serves a 6-course meal with cabbage at 4 of them. Raw cabbage salad, roasted cabbage with garlic, cabbage stuffed with pine nuts and herbs, and a strange bright green cabbage jelly for dessert. As you sip wine and nibble on what must be your 10th cabbage leaf of the day, the host tells a story. When I was a boy, he says my father took ill after drinking too much at the Saturnalia feast. He rolled around in agony, called out for the gods, cursed Bacchus, even bit a table leg. You raise your eyebrows. Then my mother fed him pickled cabbage. 2 bowls. He sat up, said he saw a vision of Minerva, then fell asleep for 12 hours and woke up healed. He looks around proudly. So I always serve cabbage. Before, after, and just in case during. One of the guests mutters, "That explains the jelly." Someone asks if it actually works. The host shrugs. He lived to 84. Could have been the cabbage. Could have been luck. Could have been the table leg. You laugh along with the others, your plate emptying as the night deepens. Outside, firelight flickers along garden walls. The breeze carries laughter, distant lyre music, and the faint scent of roasted greens. You walk home under a pale moon full of food, and more convinced than ever that cabbage may not cure everything, but it's certainly present for everything, and sometimes that's enough. The sun climbs lazily over the rooftops the next morning, lighting the city in a buttery gold. You're on your way to the baths again, that sacred Roman space where gossip, politics, and personal hygiene swirl together in equal measure. But you don't make it to the hot pool, not right away. Because in the entrance courtyard, someone is selling souvenirs. Not carved statuettes, not perfume oils. No, today's hot commodity is cabbage dolls. They're just that dried cabbage heads with faces drawn on them, wrapped in scraps of cloth like togas. Caesar's personal remedy, the seller insists winking. 1 under your bed, no bad dreams. 1 in your kitchen, no food spoils. 1 in your purse, well, maybe fewer headaches. You raise an eyebrow. He leans closer. I hear Caesar brought cabbage into Gaul. That stops you. You've heard a lot of myths by now, but this one's new. As you enter the baths, you start asking around. And sure enough, several older bathers nod sagely when you mention it. Julius himself says a man soaking in tepid water voice echoing off the tiled walls. Said to have taken barrels of pickled cabbage on his campaigns. Not for eating another ads, for wounds, for digestion, for morale. He even used it to trade with the Gauls a third chimes in. They liked its crunch. Historians still argue whether Caesar actually did bring cabbage into Gaul, or whether this is just another leafy legend stuck to his larger-than-life persona. There's no hard evidence in the commentariae, but the myth endures. Because it feels Roman, practical, oddly noble. You imagine the great General stern and sleepless dipping into a barrel of cabbage after a long march? Not a feast, not a toast, just a sour, squeaky bite of home. In the caldarium, the steam fogs your vision. Someone's placed cabbage leaves along the bench wall, claiming it helps with breathing. You sit beside them, inhale deeply, and strangely find the scent soothing. Later in the frigidarium, you overhear 2 senators debating cabbage policy. Not trade, not taxes. Just whether cabbage should be subsidized for military rations. It strengthens the stomach, one says, reduces desertion. Soldiers leave because of boredom, the other scoffs. No one deserts over dinner. You wander into a small room off the main bath, a lounge where soldiers and scribes lie sprawled on cushions sipping watered wine. One man is reading aloud from a parchment. It's a poem of sorts. O leaf of life, crisp and curled. Companion in my weary world, bitter balm to flesh and soul, heal me, cabbage, make me whole. Everyone chuckles, but no one scoffs. They've all had cabbage pressed to a bruise steeped in wine mashed into bread. Maybe it didn't cure them, but maybe it made them feel cared for. Back outside, a boy offers you a warm cabbage roll from a basket. You take it, eat it slowly as the sky shifts from blue to gold. You're not sure if Caesar took cabbage into battle. You're not sure it cures headaches or fear or heartbreak, but it's here in every corner of the city, quiet, constant waiting. And that somehow feels important. By now you've started seeing cabbage in places it probably doesn't belong. a bas-relief on a temple wall that might be a laurel-crowned cabbage, a mosaic in a noble's home depicting a lush garden, yep, cabbage, tucked between grapevines and pomegranates like it owns the place. Today you're heading up the Palatine Hill, a quieter stretch of Rome where the elite build their homes in marble and pride. Up here, the wind smells less like fish and more like ambition. But even at the top of society, Cabbage is peeking through. You're visiting a domus with ties to an old patrician family, one said, to trace its lineage back to Romulus himself. The atrium is filled with oil lamps and bronze busts all watching you. Like you might smudge the walls just by looking. Your host, a priestess of Vesta, is giving a private tour of the family shrine. She shows off amulets, scrolls, ritual vessels, and a small silver bowl inlaid with enamel cabbages. You raise your eyebrows. She smiles. Sacred food, she says softly. We offer it during temple fasts. It's said to please the gods, especially those tied to healing Salus, of course, but also Mars. And sometimes Janus. You imagine a two-faced god munching contentedly on a leaf while opening the gates of time. According to temple practice, cabbage was often presented at the beginning or end of a fast, not because it was filling, but because it symbolized cleansing. A leaf of transition. You eat it when you begin healing and when you declare yourself healed. The priestess continues. In times of illness, we wrap the statue of Salus with cabbage garlands. Once during a citywide fever, every household was asked to hang a cabbage outside their door. Did it help, you ask? She shrugs. The fever ended, eventually. Historians still debate how much stock Romans put in these ritual offerings. Some say the practice was largely symbolic, a gesture to the gods that the people were doing something. Others believe certain priests believed deeply in cabbage's divine favor, especially when paired with honey or incense. In the temple kitchen, young acolytes are preparing cabbage broth for the next day's sunrise rite. They work in silence, slicing leaves with reverent care. It's not just soup, it's an offering, a message. You step back into the garden where tall cypress trees stand like sentinels. A stone bench curves around a small pond, and there, floating lazily, are a few cabbage leaves. Placed deliberately, sacred salad in a ceremonial koi pool. You sit for a moment, watching the wind push ripples across the water. It's quiet up here. Not the absence of sound, but the kind that feels old, like the city is holding its breath. And then it happens. A soft whisper from a passing acolyte. They say cabbage grew from the tears of Juno. You turn, but he's already gone. You store that away, not as truth, but as a detail. A piece of the myth, the mood, the mosaic. As you walk back down the hill, the city reappears below loud again. Chaotic, bustling. But for a moment, the sacred lingers behind your eyes. And cabbage somehow feels like more than a vegetable again. You wander through the Subura district the next day, where the air is thicker, the streets narrower, and the smells far more aggressive. Here, Rome hums at a different pitch, louder, sweatier, more alive. And yet, even in this maze of tenements and taverns, you spot it cabbage. A woman is selling leaf bundles on a corner, shouting, 3 sesterces for the freshest cure in Rome. A boy walks past chewing a raw stalk like it's candy. Even the graffiti on a nearby wall depicts a crude drawing of a man holding cabbage like a shield, with the words he feared no fever scrawled beneath. But today you're not after jokes. You're chasing something sadder, the decline. Because even in a culture obsessed with it, cabbage eventually began to fall from its pedestal. You duck into a public records hall where a dusty old clerk lets you thumb through parchment medical archives, physician's logs, supply list, patient notes. What you find is subtle but telling. Over the decades, cabbage slips down the scrolls. It's no longer listed first, it's no longer mentioned alone. Instead, it appears alongside garlic, sage, or more exotic imports from Egypt and the East. New theories rise. The balance of the 4 humors becomes more rigidly defined. Greek methods once shunned by traditionalists like Cato start to dominate. Treatments become more complex. Cabbage, once the hero, becomes the helper. The sidekick? The afterthought. Historians still argue about why this shift happened. Some say it was cultural Rome expanding, absorbing new ideas, new plants, new preferences. Others think it was scientific observation, slowly dethroning superstition. You step into a physician's shop, one of the newer ones, freshly painted, filled with gleaming copper tools and sweet-scented herbs. The physician inside speaks briskly, confidently. I still use Cabbage, he admits, but it's old, rustic, for simple people. We have better now. He gestures to a shelf lined with imported powders and glass vials. Cabbage won't help with plague or fever or sorrow. It might soften a bruise, might soothe a rash, but it won't save a life. You leave quietly, unsure if you agree. Outside, you see a woman feeding cabbage broth to a coughing man in an alley. He sips slowly, eyes closed as if drinking a memory. Later, you return to the temple garden, curious to see if the ritual offerings have changed. They haven't. The cabbage still floats in the pond, still lines the altar. The acolytes still slice in silence, but fewer of them now. You speak with the same priestess as before. She sighs. The people want something new. Cabbage is old, simple, too familiar to feel sacred anymore. And yet she still eats it, still believes in it. You head back toward your lodging under a gray sky, passing children playing a game with cabbage stems, tossing them into jars like darts. One shouts winner gets immunity from curses. Another yells back, only if it's red cabbage. You smile. They don't need scrolls or priestly endorsement. They're keeping the faith in their own way. And maybe that's how traditions endure, not through temples or tablets, but through everyday repetition, through meals and memories, through taste and time. You slip a leaf from your satchel, tear a bit off, and chew as you walk. It's bitter, still earthy, still real. No longer the savior, maybe, but still the companion. The final morning dawns soft and pale with a mist crawling over Rome's rooftops, like it's reluctant to leave the dream world. You rise slowly, not from urgency, but habit. The city moves at half speed today, its usual chaos dulled under the hush of early light. You've come full circle now, standing once more at the edge of a cabbage field just beyond the city. The same waxy green leaves, the same scent of damp soil and faint vinegar. Only this time, you're not here to prepare for battle or to rub anything on a wound. You're here to say goodbye. You squat beside a plant and pluck a single leaf. It bends but doesn't snap, veined like a palm heavy with dew. You run your fingers along its ridges, marveling at how something so mundane has followed you through every layer of this world, from battlefield to banquet, from temple to tavern. You think about all you've seen. Cabbage wrapped around soldiers' legs and noblemen's pride. Fed to goats floated in fountains burned in rituals. You've watched it rise like a miracle and sink into quiet utility. And now as the sun lifts behind the aqueduct arches, you sit down, lean your back against a tree and breathe. Modern science has predictably had its say. Today we know cabbage contains vitamin C fiber antioxidants, nothing mystical but solid enough. It's used in poultices, still occasionally even in hospitals for inflammation. There are small studies on gut health, fermented cabbage aiding digestion, even cancer-fighting properties in cruciferous compounds. It's not a panacea, but it's not a joke either. Historians still debate how to frame the Roman cabbage obsession. Was it belief, desperation, cultural inertia? Or just the quiet knowledge that sometimes healing doesn't have to be dramatic to be meaningful? The leaf in your hand is limp now, warm from your skin. You lay it gently on the earth, not as an offering, just to return it. Wind picks up, leaves rustle. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs. You close your eyes. The light fades slowly across the field, settling into that soft golden wash that only happens just before dusk. The kind of light that makes even cracked stones and dusty cabbage rows look like part of something ancient and sacred. Your breath deepens, the world slows. The rustle of leaves softens into a gentle lull, like a blanket being drawn up over your shoulders. There's no need to move now. No need to remember what time it is or where the next street turns. Just listen to the cicadas beginning their hum, to the distant splash of a fountain, to the weightless hush of